introduction. To me, it sounds like someone who can't hold down a job. And, I am thrilled to be here. My dad went to Rutgers. I'm a New Jersey boy, grew up in West Orange, obviously worked at St. Barnabas. More thrilled to be here because it's really reassuring and just a great feeling to see people taking time out from your very easy schedules as medical students and grad students to come and commit yourself to something like this. Medicine is great, but medicine's also sort of formulaic. You know, 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, a residency, maybe a fellowship, and then a job in a big hospital system. So the kind of commitment to independently figuring out problems and coming up with solutions is a great thing. So competition or no competition, everyone here is a winner in some sort. So again, thank you for the invitation. That's my short title for this morning. This is a talk I have not given before about cold winter mornings in New Jersey. That's my first slide, and that's my last slide. I do have the privilege of giving a course at the Columbia on entrepreneurship, and my job is now to talk very fast and give you the entire course in a half an hour. So let's just dive right in. Now, if you are like my students, your concept of entrepreneurship going in is probably very idea-centric. And yes, the root of entrepreneurship is taking your ideas out of your head and making them tangible. But it doesn't really start with ideas. And if you want to handicap what you're doing in a way that's going to make it successful, is start by identifying a problem first. And luckily, healthcare is like a theme park for problems and solutions that need to be solved. If you were to take the smartest people in the United States, lock them in a hotel for as much time as it would take, and give them the task of designing the worst possible healthcare system that they could, one with all the worst incentives, one that was inconsistent in its application of healthcare delivery, one that wasted as many resources as it could, and one that was often very unfair, they would probably get together, have a cup of coffee, come out and say, why? There's nothing to design, we have that already. And through your medical careers, I know we've got people from first year of med school on, you are going to be encountering things that just don't work, or things that should be working well, and you're going to kind of silently keep track of things of ideas that you have for making them better. And over time, you're going to stress test these ideas. Most of them will kind of come and go. It's not like you have nothing else on your minds. But a few of them are going to stick with you. And you're going to come up with this well of really good ideas, and some of them you're going to decide to run with. And it is our job to kind of give you the tools to do that. So the ideas are great, and what you want to do is you want to go from idea to solution. And that's really what entrepreneurship is. Now, chapter 2, how to talk about your company. And this is where you should be bristling. You should be saying, wait a second, entrepreneurship is my opportunity for creativity. This is my chance to kind of do my own thing, to be fearless, to cast about in ways that leave my personal stamp on it. Why are you suddenly giving me a script? Why are you telling me how to talk about my company and how to be creative? Well, within the greatness of your ideas, within the hard work you're putting into it, there's a certain amount of unbridled enthusiasm which sometimes has to be organized. And what I'd like to do is present not necessarily a best ideas or a best practice for how to talk about your company and how to talk about your project, but just a means by which to organize it, to make sure you don't lose the important stuff. So the first thing you do when you've decided that one of those ideas you're going to work with, you're going to try to make real, is you give it a name. And giving a name sounds kind of trite. It's like, who cares if it has a name? But the purpose of giving your project a name is to make sure that you've separated it from you. Because if you start talking about an idea that you have, and you don't have a name for it, it's very easy for the person you're talking to perceive it as your hobby. And there's nothing wrong with having a hobby aimed towards relieving suffering, curing sick, and preventing disease. That's pretty good. But if this is someone that you want to work with, someone that you want to maybe fund you, work for you, You want to really establish that this is an entity in and of itself. So you give it a name. Step 2, and this is going to sound trivial again, come up with a 3, 4, 5, or 6 word way to describe it. A very quick explanation just sums up what it is you're doing. A few years ago, I decided that, in my old field, in vitro fertilization, we needed to automate the IVF lab. So I started a company, and I went around and I talked about it. I said, well, what does the company do? I said, it's for automate the IVF lab. And when you throw out that quick description, you get one of 2 reactions. You get, wow, that sounds cool, or some equivalent to it. Or you get, stare off into space, or discuss the weather, or sports, or anything but, or look of horror, how do I get out of this conversation? And that is a great, great thing. Because when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to start a new venture, you really want a very efficient way to separate the world into 2 groups. There's the group that cares and the group that doesn't. Now, the group that cares is going to turn into your employees, your suppliers, your business development people, and the people that are going to fund you. They're going to become your mentors and your board members. The group that doesn't care may become the people you go to football games with, your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, important other roles, but they're not going to be the people that are part of your business world. And it's important to delineate that quickly, because as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, you're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. And you really want to zero in on the people that are going to be part of this. And you also don't want to bore all the people that are not. So you come up with a very quick description, and you determine very fast. People, believe me, people will tell you which of those 2 groups they want to be part of. And if you get the positive signal, yeah, tell me more, you go right into your pitch. Now, pitching is probably not what you think it is. It's not Shark Tank. It's not a free-form way to, kind of paint an abstract picture of what it is you're trying to do. There's a very specific group of things you want to get in your pitch that takes the picture in your head and places it exactly into the person you're talking to's head, so that you're talking about the same thing very quickly. So the first assignment I give to my own students, I say, I want you, they have to have a company idea before they're allowed to take the course. And I tell them, come in ready to pitch your company, but don't look up how to pitch. Just use your common sense to come in and pitch. And they all come in, and I bring them up on stage one after another, and they pitch their companies, and they give incredibly intelligent, very, very articulate, terrible pitches. Because the pitches tend to be all about their idea. And it's very narrow. And the picture that they have tends to be very different than the picture that their listener has. So what we do is we go from there to describe how you do a pitch, or maybe not a best practices, but a good way to do it. And then I have them do it again. And they never forget, because you never forget something if you screw it up first and do it right. So, our version of a really good pitch has 5 components to it. Component number 1 is not your idea. Component number 1 is the problem that you want to solve. So you put the issue in context. Okay, here's something that we can agree upon as a problem. So you're both looking at things the same way. And like I say, you're going to be encountering a hell of a lot of problems. To make it real, you go to component number 2. Component number 2 is, who is it affecting? Now, one of my students years ago actually was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 for an idea that they came up with for a competition to meet the Ebola crisis. This is a few years ago, and Columbia sponsored a competition. Come up with an idea to help people taking care of Ebola in Africa. It was a very simple solution. The first responders and the healthcare people that take care of Ebola have to put on hazmat suits. The hazmat suits are covered with bleach. The bleach kills the Ebola, protects the healthcare workers. Problem is, the bleach rapidly evaporates. You don't know if it's still there or not, and once it evaporates, you lose your protection. So what did they do? They went into the laboratory, and they invented a dye. The dye gets mixed with the bleach, and as the bleach evaporates, the dye fades. And it was a brilliant thing. And a couple of trips to Africa to field test it, a grant from the Gates Foundation later, and the Forbes Award, which was nice. And that is now on the market. It's being used both there, it's being used by fire departments, being used by police forces. So there, what was the problem? The problem is the bleach wasn't protecting people once it evaporated. Who did it affect? It's affecting the people on the front lines, trying to prevent the spread of Ebola. So right there with those two lines, they haven't even talked about what they're doing. They have the attention of everyone they're talking to. They've established the importance of what they're doing. Then they come up with their solution. Number 3, what is your idea? Now you hit us with the idea. We're ready for it. It's already, you've primed us to pass what we call the so what test. You don't have to justify why it's a good idea. You've given us the justification already. So that's the first part of your pitch. What's the problem, who's it affecting, and what's your idea? Number 4, tell me something about you. Because you may tell me a great idea, and then stumble all over everything else. I say, boy, I wish somebody good was trying to develop that. So you want to give me a little bit of your own credentials. And believe me, it doesn't have to be a 10-page CV. Clearly you've told me you've identified a good problem. You've identified what you're trying to do with it. Just give me a little bit more. If you're developing something that requires chemistry, tell me who's going to be doing your chemistry. If you require something if you're developing something that needs coding, who's doing your coding? Tell me that you at least have some ability to assess the nuts and bolts work that needs to be done. And then number 5, leave me with a number that gives me some idea of the scope of the problem that you're tackling. The fund that I'm running, my venture fund writes checks between $500,000 and $2 million. We're relatively small. But if you're coming to me with something that is a really niche type thing, that maybe has an addressable market through the world of a few $1 million, it's not the type of thing that my investors are expecting me to invest in. Similarly, if I'm running a private equity fund that writes checks of $10 or $50 million at a time, these little things aren't going to move the needle for them. Or if it's a $1 billion addressable market, my venture fund is too small. So you got to help me out here a little bit. But this is good because you're helping yourself out too. Because if something's not right for me, but you've impressed me that you're tackling a good problem in a serious way with a great idea, then I'm going to work for you. I'm going to find someone for you to talk to. Because you've done a great job pitching to me. I want to help. And one of the ways I'm going to help may be to put you in touch with somebody else. And this is the recommendation from me is a lot better from you than you're going on Google and getting someone's website and sending them a cold call. Because not only am I going to give you somebody that I think is interested, I'm going to tell you to use my name. Or maybe if I really am impressed with what you're doing, I'll call for you and I'll set up the appointment. So that pitch is really, really important in terms of narrowing down people that you want to talk to and getting to other people you want to talk to. And it's a low yield thing. You're going to be giving that pitch to lots and lots and lots of people. Many more that are actually going to engage with you. But that's the way you get to them. Now, I hate the term networking. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But if you think about it as you got something you're really passionate about and you want to discuss it with people who care, that's not so bad. And framing your pitch in that way kind of leads you down that direction. Now, okay, we're talking about how do you talk about your company. So we've been through you give it a name, you give a little brief description, you get the go-ahead, you go into your pitch. What's the end point there? There you come to another crossroads. You may get the blank looks again, the changing the subject, the kind of awkward, well, it was really nice talking to you, handshake, and you never see the person again. That's okay, because you don't want to waste your time talking with people who really don't want to interact with you on it. That's great, they're doing you a favor. You don't want to be strung along. But you're also going to get a lot of people say, you know, I really like what you're doing. You hand off a business card, some means of contacting, and then you guys are in. And you're part of the inner circle. And you are going to work out a way to work together. And that's the way you talk about your company. It's you know, maybe not a best practice, but it's a good one. Okay, chapter 2. When you interact with people in an entrepreneurship setting, especially when you're in your part of your careers, which is early, when you're starting your first company, you're developing your first project, each of these interactions has two ongoing dynamics. There's the above the surface stuff, which we just talked about. The ideas, the facts that you bring to it, the questions I've asked you. And then there's the below the surface stuff. And this is the stuff that's a little bit tougher to define. And the below the surface stuff, when I have somebody coming to me and pitching something to me, I'm really going to be assessing the idea and assessing the validity of it. And yeah, I want to get an idea about their credentials, but I also want to learn about them. I want to see, like, to what extent, are these people that work hard? Are these people that there's a certain level of truth they're going to? That, yeah, they're kind of a natural curiosity / critical thinking that they bring to what they're doing, to the fact that I'm not going to have to fact check everything they present to me. To what degree do they wing it? And let's be honest, everyone wings it a little bit. But I've got to try to figure out, okay, just how much is it? Is this someone that kind of conveniently makes stuff up? And we've all encountered this. And it's one thing if someone's trying to sell me a set of headphones. They're going to wing it, they're going to say, these are the best sounding headphones in the world. Fine, I'm going to stick them on and I'll decide if they sound good. But if someone's going to give me really fact-based stuff in a very narrow area that I'm going to need to do lots and lots of work for, I'm going to start probing to figure out, how valid is this person? And how do I do things like that? Well, one thing I do is I'm going to ask you questions that I already know the answer to. And I'm going to intersperse them with questions I don't know the answer to. And I'm going to figure out if just the quality of information you're giving me. What does that mean? Believe me, I've been there. It's so tempting to imply that you know the answers to everything. It's very tempting to give an answer that sounds good and then go later on to look it up and make sure that you were close. You got to train yourself not to do that. I don't mind hearing, I don't know. I don't mind hearing, well, I know this part, I don't really know that. That's okay. It's not a bad thing to say, boy, that's a real good question. I never asked myself that. Because the opposite, the making something up, the kind of winging it part, that does not fly. And if you want to, the above the surface stuff may all check off all the boxes. If the below the surface stuff doesn't, you're going to lose me. So you need more than just a good idea well articulated. So you need to be very aware of that kind of stuff. Now, going along with that, you are going to be establishing relationships that go into the fraught topic of mentorship. Now, mentorship is something you hear a lot about. And I do say, in general, beware of anything that's imprecisely defined. In my own course, we talk about mentorship a lot. And we define two categories of mentorship. There's capital M mentorship, which is a formal relationship where someone may say, this is my mentor, or someone would say, I am mentoring this person. And it's kind of formal, it's defined, it's fairly long-lasting. And then there's small M mentorship. The thing you strive for starting out, as you start developing your relationships, is strive for small M mentorship. You want to make somebody uncomfortable, you walk up to somebody early in the relationship and say, listen, would you be my mentor? And talk about awkward silences. Because when you say that, you don't know what they picture that relationship to be. They may think, boy, I'd love a relationship with this person. I really respect what they're doing. I like it, and I want to help them out. They may think mentorship, discussed that way, is a huge commitment, and they may back away. Small M mentorship is, the currency there is advice, contacts, the ability to bounce something off. Nobody in goodwill is going to, you walk up to someone and say, I'd like to bounce an idea off you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I need a contact for something. That's all okay. That's a complete I'm okay, you're okay type interaction. That's the type of thing that may lead to a large capital M mentorship later on. But don't be shy about asking for the small M mentorship. And let's also be honest about the currency, the equation of mentorship. The equation of mentorship is, what does the mentor offer? The mentor offers advice, judgment, perspective, contacts. What does the mentee offer? Frankly, you don't have to offer anything. You're asking for things in goodwill. So the expectations of you, there should be none. We as mentors we should be expecting nothing out of you. Now, there's an etiquette to mentorship. For example, if I introduce you to somebody or I set up an appointment, please show up. You know, and this has happened. You know, somebody introduces you to someone, their contact of theirs, and you decide it's not that important, and you blow it off, forget the relationship with the small M mentor as well. But that's kind of common sense. You're not going to do that type of thing anyway. Don't argue with the mentor. You know, somebody offers you advice. If you don't like the advice, just ignore it. Just say, thank you, I appreciate your perspective. When I offer you a piece of advice, there's no I don't expect you to take it. Disagree with me, that's all fine. These are relationships they take a long time to develop. They can be very, very, very valuable, but you can't really mold them like you're molding clay. Just kind of let them happen. But let them happen by not being, not being shy about it. We want to help people out. Now, within that context, there are some things that you can do that you screw up. Now let's take a step back. As a new entrepreneur, as somebody developing a project, there's 4 types of things that you develop. There's 4 tracks that you run through your head constantly. So when you decide, I'm gonna do this, you say, okay, well, I'm an entrepreneur. What happens now? Well, what happens now kind of breaks itself down into 4 categories. Category number 1 is setting up an organization, giving it an identity. And that includes the pitch. It also includes setting up a company. Because if you don't set up a company, guess what? The legal system in the IRS still has a designation for you. And they do things like assign liability and assign tax, and tax you and things like that. So up front, decide if you're going to set up a partnership or a single proprietorship or an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp. I don't expect you to know these things. I'm just giving you the idea that you got to talk to a lawyer about this kind of stuff. So that's 1 is identity. Number 2 is you're going to set up a strategy. Say, okay, when am I going to do serial proofs of concept to show acceleration of value and be able to raise money and things like that? You're going to set up a funding strategy based on that strategy for serial value inflections. And finally, you're going to figure out what's proprietary about what you do and how do you keep control of that stuff. You can decide to give it away for free, which is fine. You can decide that your strategy has got a first mover advantage that's so great that it doesn't matter what you can tell anybody else, you're going to be so entrenched. Or you may decide to protect it with patents. And it's important to address these things up front. It's important because it takes a long time. It's also important because if you start telling people things or propagating your ideas early, you may find that later on they're not patentable. So you got to be careful about it. Which leads me back to the mentorship relationship. Your goal to establish a long-standing relationship may conflict with your goal to protect your proprietary ideas. And here you got to be careful. There is no better way to turn off a potential mentor or advisor by asking them up front to sign an NDA. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Hi, I really need your advice on this thing that we're really excited about developing that we like doing. Would you sign this form, please, so I can talk to you about it? It's like, thank you, bye. It's just not going to fly. One reason it's kind of rude. Secondly, it comes across as very naive. It implies that at the conceptual 30,000 feet idea level, that your stuff is so unique that you got to protect people from stealing it. Let's be honest, most of our ideas do not pass one of the key concepts of patentability, which is non-obviousness. Most of our ideas have been come up with by other people in other settings at other times. And that's okay. The fact that you have a good idea means that other smart people probably have the same good idea. There are going to be specifics about it, and the success ultimately is going to be defined by your execution. So when you come into me, feel comfortable, feel free to discuss your idea, the concept, again, the problem you're solving, who you're helping, what the idea is in broad strokes that I can understand it, so that I want to dig in deeper to how you're going to execute. What I don't want you to do is pull out a napkin and a pen and draw out a molecular structure for a drug that you've developed in the laboratory, because you're putting me in a bad position. Because if somebody goes ahead and develops that, they're going to think I gave it to them. So there's no need, I don't need that level of detail. I don't want to see your code. You know, I'm sure some of you have seen that movie, The Social Network, where he writes the equation in the disappearing mist on the window. I don't want the equation. Don't give it, I don't need the equation to be able to become an advisor to help you along, or frankly, even to invest in you. Once it comes time for you to give me the equation, to write out the code to do that, then I'll be more than happy to sign the NDA. And protect yourself that way. Next chapter. Next chapter is called No Guts, but Big Denominators. Another way you can kind of screw up things as an early level and early stage career entrepreneur, something I don't want to hear you say, and this is going to be very counterintuitive. I say, don't talk to me about what your gut tells you. You know, and you can say, wait a second, you want me to be passionate. You want me to feel, you want me to believe in my ideas. You know, my gut tells me this, and I've got this real feeling. It's like, I'm sorry, at this stage in your career, I could care less what your gut tells you. I want data, I want rational fact basis, I want things I can measure, I want reference points. Later on, when you've established your judgment, and your intelligence, and your execution, and the amount of research you've done, yeah, then your gut feeling matters. At this stage, your gut feeling is not a source of credibility. So I know it's, believe me, I want all the other stuff, but don't lead with your gut feelings. It's really not going to get you too far when you're trying to establish yourself as an early stage, or as a first-time entrepreneur or an early stage career. How do you establish that credibility? Well, number one is know your numbers. Yeah, any number in your presentation, and you remember the elevator pitch, that last part is going to be some numeric quantification of where your idea came from. You have to be able to derive that number for me. And going along with the knowing your numbers is number two, be ready for the second question. Yeah, you practice your presentations, you practice your pitches. We're not going to sit there passively and just take it all in and then clap at the end of it. If we're thinking about writing a check to you, or more importantly, dedicating our time to help you out, or our network and introduce you to people, or we want to become your customer, or I'm going to introduce you to my students as potential people to work for you, I'm going to be on you from one assumption after another. I've got to fact check and reality check every assumption that you're basing your plan on. And that's good because it gives you the opportunity to really show how much you've done. So you've got to be ready for everything you present to me. Be ready for the question where I'm going to point to that number and say, where'd you derive it? You don't have to give me the page number of the reference point, but tell me where it came from. Come from the CDC, came from the World Health Organization? Fine. One of the best open source sources of information, go to CIA.gov. We think of the CIA as a spy organization. It's also a great open source management consulting firm. There's great places to get data. Tell me where it came from. Similarly, know your big denominators. What are the big denominators? Big denominators are the population of the world, population of the United States, size of the world economy, size of the US economy, size of the healthcare economy. If you're going into developing something for neurologists, how many neurologists are in the United States? How many neurology practices in the United States? My area is assisted reproduction. There's 35,000 obstetrician gynecologists in the United States. There's 1,100 reproductive endocrinologists, 486 IVF programs. In 2016, we did 270,000 IVF cycles, and we created 70,000 babies. There's 7 million patients with infertility in the United States. You need to have these numbers at your fingertips. As you can tell, I spent last year pitching an IVF-focused venture fund. You've got to have these numbers at your fingertips Because some of the things that you're going to be asked to comment on, you're going to need to be doing on the fly. And people are going to, define this for me. Like one of the areas of my particular interest is preventing disease, preventing genetic disease using in vitro fertilization, going beyond infertility. People say, well, how big a problem is that? So there, I need to go into the genetics literature. How many autosomal and recessive monogenic diseases result in babies with diseases born every year? It's about 30,000. 30,000 if they're all recessive, that means 120,000 pregnancies at risk. This is the level of granularity that you want to bring to these discussions. This is what makes you an expert, not the passion that you bring into your gut feelings about this. And this is what I mean when I say know your big denominators. Okay, let's get close to wrapping up. Last thing, and this is a stylistic thing, this is a symbolic thing. Don't call yourself a CEO. Don't name yourself a CEO, particularly if you have a one-person organization. You want to avoid hubris. You want to avoid being, overly impressed with yourself. You want to be, you want to establish a series of I'm okay, you're okay interactions. You name yourself CEO, it's kind of it just doesn't make you look better. Now specifically, a chief executive officer is named within an organization by the board of directors. The board of directors appoints you CEO. Once you have a board of directors and it named you CEO, at that point you are CEO. Guess what? Never call yourself CEO even then. You want to call yourself something, call yourself founder. It's like just, you justify yourself, you validate yourself by your knowledge, by your passion, by what you bring to it in substance. Don't worry about the labels. Leave the labels out of it. And this brings me to the last point I want to make. And hopefully I'm not going too far over time. There's a shadow curriculum that you've been learning since kindergarten. Through kindergarten, middle school, high school, college, now into med school or graduate school. It's not for any particular classes, but we're going to look for it, and it's stuff that you need to continue developing in yourself to make yourself effective. That shadow curriculum includes being the calmest person in the room, being able to handle things not going well, shake off the stress, and stay at it. I had the privilege of being able to work in operating rooms for about 15 years. And you ought to talk to anybody that works in an operating room, and when things go wrong, there are the people whose blood pressure goes down, that everyone relies on, and then there are the people that lose it. And the people, you talk to the scrub nurses and the circulators, they know who's who. They know who you can rely upon. And underlying the things I'm trying to figure out, that's something I'm trying to figure out, but that's something you need to work on every day. Two other things you need to develop in your shadow curriculum. One is your sense of humor. It's particularly your sense of humor about yourself. When you try to develop a new idea, when you want to develop a new project, when you want to be right when up to now everybody else has been wrong, you're putting yourself out there. And believe me, along the way, you are going to screw up royally. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to embarrass yourself now and then, you're going to really do things, it's cringeworthy type stuff. My daughter has a term she calls secondary embarrassment, where she's sitting and she watches somebody do that, and she just feels so bad for them, even if she doesn't know who they are. That's going to come. If you've got your sense of humor about yourself, you just said, boy, I guess I really screwed that one up. You shake it off like a wet dog, and you just move along. And it's a very important characteristic for your resiliency and your strength. And this is going to make you a better med student, it's going to make you a better doctor, it's going to make you a better entrepreneur. Frankly, it's going to make you a better parent and a better spouse, too. It's a very important thing to have. And finally, the thing that I most look for in the people I want to work with as closely as I can, and that's a sense of humility. That's the ability that, to know that you're not all that important. You individually, there's nothing that you're going to do that can't be done by somebody else. So you're going to attack it, you're going to work hard at it, and you're going to realize that to make it work is going to require you doing your best plus a lot of luck. But you know why that's important? It's important because you're not staking everything on the outcome of what you're doing. If things go wrong, you're not going to crawl into a hole that we're going to need to dig you out of. it's going to be where your strength and your resiliency comes from. It's almost counterintuitive. You think that, boy, the people with the big egos, they're the ones that are the strongest. But in reality, it's that humility that gives you that ability to be resilient, that gives you that strength, that gives you the ability to laugh at yourself, that gives you the ability to keep going, which is really what entrepreneurship is all about. So I'm going to end on that note. Again, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be here today. Thank you.